Welcome to a special episode of the Truckers Network radio show on TNCRadio.Live. I'm your host, Shelley Johnson. This is part of a series of celebrity interviews to celebrate our professional drivers. I was joined by Tom Kelly and co-host Bill Waldrop when we were attending the Guilty by Association Truck Show in Joplin, Missouri. Enjoy.
Good afternoon. Welcome to TNCRadio.Live. This is the Truckers Network radio show. And now here's your host, Shelley Johnson.
Thank you, Tom. I appreciate that. Yes, you're listening to the Truckers Network radio show on TNCRadio.Live. And today we're broadcasting live from the Guilty by Association Truck Show in Joplin, Missouri, where about 1,000 drivers have brought their semis to showcase. We have an entire crew with us today. Our drivers enjoy the news, information, and entertainment we provide. And today we have a very special guest with us. You know him with the famous slogan, "We'll leave the light on for you." Tom Bodett is the signature voice of Motel 6, and believe it or not, he also drove semi in Alaska. The Michigan native is a familiar voice on National Public Radio's Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me, and a regular performer for the Moth Radio Hour storytelling series. He's an accomplished author. He's written humorous and relatable stories that even involve professional drivers. He currently lives in Vermont, where he makes things out of wood, and as his website said, explores the tipping point of his tractor. He's an American icon, and we're really excited to speak with him today. Welcome, Tom. I really appreciate you being on the show.
Oh, thanks, Shelley. It's great to be here. I wish I could be at the trucker show. I can only imagine the rigs that you guys got going on there.
Oh, and from every vintage, from what I understand. You know, I've listened to you as the wonderful, friendly voice of Motel 6 for years. You have that all-around American, down-home, and relatable sound. Could you tell us a little bit about how you got started? Who's Tom Bodett?
Well, how I got started in radio was I was building houses up in Alaska, and I had always wanted to be a writer, but I dropped out of college in the mid-'70s to hitchhike up to Alaska and see what was going on. They were building a pipeline. There was all kinds of, stuff to be done and had. And so I got involved in that, kind of forgot about writing until about 10 years in. And I started doing these little commentaries for our local public radio station, just about stuff I was doing, getting the dog fixed, quitting smoking. That was one of them, going on a halibut boat on the crew and just your basic Alaska, working man stories. And they found their way down the network to All Things Considered, which is their kind of flagship evening news program out of Washington. And then after that, the world kind of beat a path to my door. I was got a book contract, and then I got an advertising contract with this little motel chain that had never advertised in their history, and wanted to start. When I asked why me, they said, "Well, you sound like the guy who stays there."
Okay. Yeah.
Which I took as a compliment.
Yeah.
And it just kind of took off with me. I think the most fun about it then and now is I never really plotted any of this. It just kind of kept happening. I kept trying to do my best to do a good job at it, and on and on it goes.
That's so very cool. And I understand you actually came up with the Motel 6 slogan.
Well, yeah, it was in the first session, we had a bunch of scripts, and it was really just for test marketing purposes, and none of them had really an end. There was no tagline on the end. It was, they tried a variety of different things. Hi, it's Tom Bodett for Motel 6, and just they didn't really end. They just kind of stopped, and so we started tossing out ideas about what we might do. Like, how about, and we'll leave the key under the mat for you. It's like, no, that won't work. And I said, well, let me just try this. And I'm Tom Bodett for Motel 6, and we'll leave the light on for you, which is, that's just something you say to your kids, or what your mom said to you when you're coming in late or coming in from out of town. They say, we'll leave the light on for you. It was just a nice, friendly American idiom, if you will. And it wasn't like a choir of angels sang and the heavens rolled back and revealed the majestic six in the sky. It was like, oh, yeah, well, that might work. And then they took it down to wherever they go to do such things, and market tested it. And by God, I've been saying it for 35 years now.
Oh, and it's great. I mean, it was a classic slogan. You couldn't have found anything better, and everybody knows it. And people think Motel 6. I mean, that's terrific branding.
Well, thank you. And I wish I could take all the credit, but there are actually people with brains and college degrees on the other end of this stuff, and they very quickly saw what they had, and we have been working together so well on this for, like I say, this was 1986. How many years is that? 35 years.
35 now, yeah.
Yeah, and it still works. The only thing we really change is to just try to keep updating with the times. When we first started, they didn't even have telephones in the room. So I remember recording those spots. It was all tongue in cheek. It was like, I have this exciting news from Motel 6. We now have phones in the rooms. And I mean, it was hysterical because we were making fun of ourselves, and we still do when, where we can. We don't take ourselves too seriously because we want people to feel as at home with us as they are at their own homes.
Oh, absolutely. And, I think that's what's made it so successful, because it is so relatable. It's not pretentious in any way. And people say, this is a place I can stop and I'll feel comfortable.
Yeah. And it's a place like, stay here because it's the smart thing to do. We always, we repeat it over and over, why pay more for something that you're not going to use anyway? Who really needs the French milled soap and the avocado body balm and and that painting of whatever that is on the wall over the bed,
Right. Yeah, exactly. And nobody needs to have all those cocktails in the fridge and that sort of thing that cost you $10 a little bottle anyway, right?
That's right. That's right.
Because when people go traveling, they basically, the room is where they just lay their head, and they want to go see the sights.
Our very first television commercial, they didn't do them for years. And of course, we're Motel 6. There was no budget for big fancy commercials. So the commercial was the screen on the TV just went black. And then you just heard my voice say, "This is what those big fancy hotels look like with your eyes closed." And it's like, and just like Motel 6, and so why pay for the painting and the and all the things you can't, you're going to be sleeping there anyway. And
Exactly.
That was big fun.
Brilliant.
Oh, it's a brilliant concept. Absolutely.
Well, Tom, being a fellow radio person, I kind of look at things different. And I remember first hearing these ads a long time ago. And when I first heard the ad, before I knew any of your background, I said, they must have gotten the guy that owns a Motel 6, or he owns the entire company. He's like, sounds like Uncle Joe, it's Uncle Tom. Hey, come on over and stay at our place like that. And I said, man, that guy is really good, not knowing that you were actually in broadcasting. I thought you were just one of the owners of one of the franchises or something, and it was absolutely brilliant. And you obviously made the company. It's just a fantastic story. And then I found out that you were actually working in radio in Alaska, and I said, now how does a guy that works in Alaska in radio get a national spot like this? I mean, that's a one in a million kind of thing. So those things are hard to get. So I'm sure that's an interesting tale how you got tagged for that and got the whole contract.
Well, I mean, that's I was saying a little earlier. I mean, that I had these weekly commentaries on All Things Considered, and there was an ad, a creative director down in Dallas, they had just gotten the account, the Motel 6 account. And he was listening to his radio one day, and he swears afterwards that he wasn't a public radio listener, that's just the station that his truck was stuck on, But I think that's just because he lives in Texas and he didn't want to admit, he actually listened to NPR. You know how that is. And so he heard me, and he gave me a call just out of the blue. This was back when you could just call information and get anybody's phone number, and asked me if I'd be interested in doing a little advertising. And I said, boy, I don't know. I mean, I was still building houses. I was doing public radio commentary for all of $100 a week or something. And I said, so how much does something like that pay? And he told me, and I said, okay. and,
I'm in.
and there we go.
Yeah, right.
Wow. Awesome story. Awesome story.
Tom, did you always aspire to go into broadcasting? Was that kind of your dream when you were growing up? Or?
Never. No, never,
Okay.
never even crossed my mind. I wanted to be a writer. That was something that I did want to do. I never thought at all about broadcasting. In fact, like everyone else in the world, I hate the sound of my own voice. I still do. And I cannot be in the room when people are listening to takes and all that because it just drives me crazy.
Same here. Absolutely.
I don't like any of it. And the only reason I did was a friend of mine who worked at the public radio station in Homer, Alaska. And he said, because I had written a little piece for the local paper about quitting smoking that I thought was funny. And he thought it was funny too. And he says, you should read that on the radio. And I said, read it on the radio? Why would I do that? And he says, no, you sound great. You got a great voice. Of course, at the time I was a 2-pack a day smoker and I was building houses and yelling at people all day long. So my voice was even lovelier than it is now. And I did it, and it people said, that was great, Tom. You're going to do that again. And so I did it again, and it just one of those things that just started happening. But no, I never in a million years would have guessed this is where I'd be. If you'd told me, 40 years ago, Tom, this is where you're going to be 40 years from now, and this is what you're going to be doing, I would have screwed that up in 100 different ways. I wouldn't even have known how to get there or even how to get started.
You also drove semi in Alaska, which that's a story. You said it was a Kenworth?
It was a single axle Kenworth cab over, and I bought it for my construction business when I at the time, I was down in a little town called Petersburg, Alaska, on an island in the middle of Southeast Alaska. And we were building houses like crazy there. This was the 80s, and the oil boom was just spraying money all over everybody. Everybody gets a hospital, everybody gets a house, everybody gets a bridge to nowhere. And I needed a truck to move these modular homes that I was selling. These big double wide, they're stick built homes that come in 2 big pieces. You see them going down the road all the time. I'm sure there's some of your truckers there who haul them. And the problem was once I got them to town on the barge, I had to move them from the barge to the house site. And I could not find a trucker who would do that for me. And so I bought this regularly. There was a bunch of loggers in this, but there weren't any real, just like trucks around, if you will. It was an island. What are you going to do with a truck? And so I bought this thing just to move those modular homes, and which was great. And that's why it was single axle and all of that, because it needed to be in tight places. I once backed it up 6 miles down a dirt road to a house site. I never could see anything because it's like 16 feet wide or something.
Sure.
I couldn't see anything except the guy in front of me telling me what to do for 6 long miles. Well, we got it there. So that was, tons of adventures. I mean, Alaska at that time, there weren't a lot of rules and regulations about things. And like if you wanted to move something like that from one end of town to the other, you put a couple guys on the roof with 2x4s to lift up the cables and the power lines and stuff to go over the top. Because who are you going to ask for permission or a permit from? There was nobody. So we just would do these things. And really about the only authority around was the Coast Guard, and we never got involved with them with my truck, at least. We have that.
Well, that's a good thing.
And And the only long hauling I did, if you could even call it that, was when I first bought it. I bought it in Portland, Oregon. It was used, of course. I bought it in like late '80s, so it was already almost a 20-year-old truck, but in good shape. And I had a mechanic that I knew check it out, make sure it was good. So I kind of bought it sight unseen. The first time I'd ever driven a truck like that in my life was the day I drove it off the lot.
Oh my goodness.
And grinding the gears all the way out the road, and then onto I-5 up through Seattle, where I was picking up another buddy of mine who was going to help me drive it up through British Columbia, put it on the ferry, and then in Prince Rupert and get it to my town in Petersburg. So we drove the thing, bobtail, all the way through British Columbia, which was terrifying because number one, I didn't really know how to drive a truck. And number two, it was so unstable. I mean, I think as all the truckers know, I mean, a bobtail single axle truck is, I don't know, it's like driving around on a fence post or something. And, but we made it. We didn't die. I did take all of the lights out at a truck stop somewhere in Prince George.
Oops.
Where I knew how tall my stack was. It was like 1310 or something, as I recall. And the sign over the canopy, where the pumps were at this truck stop, said 1311. So I said, okay, I fit. So I pull under there, but they did not measure for the fluorescent light fixtures hanging down.
Oh.
And I drove all the way through the thing to the pump at the end and took the entire, and as I went, I could hear something and I could see, like the lights are changing as I go. And I was just like, wow, that was weird. And then I stop and I just have this wake of, this is nothing but glass and smoke and darkness where I can't. They let me go though. I said, hey, it said 1311. I'm 1310. You can measure it for yourself.
Yeah. Actually, you had a very legitimate point there. They should have accommodated for that.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Hey, Shelley, why don't we take a break real quick and let Tom get a drink of water. You're listening to TNCRadio.Live, and we are visiting with Tom Bodett of Motel 6. We'll be right back. We're going to take a quick break, and just stay tuned.
Great leaders challenge their people not to stop at the first right answer. Tighten the Lug Nuts is the book that will help you move past that first right answer to be more effective, more productive, and more successful. This book serves as a blueprint that can be easily applied by leaders, entrepreneurs, truckers, owner-operators, all of us in our everyday lives. This is one of the best leadership books you can read to help you accelerate towards your personal and professional goals. Plus, a portion of the proceeds will be donated to truckerschristmasgroup.org. Visit TightenTheLugNuts.com to order your copy today.
Good afternoon and welcome again to TNCRadio.Live. I am Bill Walter down here at the G-Bats Truck Show. We are in Joplin, Missouri on a beautiful day down here, low 70s, a little cloud cover. What a place. I've never been here before, and it's an amazing amount of trucks down here. And Tom Bodett, I know you can appreciate it. I can't even count all the trucks at this location. There has got to be 1,000 trucks down here, and they are in every size, shape, color, and the personalities of the drivers that drive them mixed in there, which is, you were in the trucking world for a while, so I know you can understand that. They are some interesting characters down here, and they're very proud of these trucks. They take great pride in what they do and the trucks they drive. So
I was looking on the Facebook page here as we were talking, and that's some gorgeous rigs there, and some really vintage stuff too. It's beautiful.
Yeah, there's an historical society that has their rigs there this year, which is really cool.
Yeah, some beautiful trucks. We have a beautiful dark blue 1951 truck over here that's been totally redone. All the chrome is redone. Looks like it just rolled off the showroom floor. And everybody's going by and taking pictures of this thing. And there's a bunch of examples like that here. It's just startling how many beautiful trucks. they are. So I'm getting lots of pictures. I'll be sure to send them to you, Shelley. It's quite a place.
Oh, I'm so jealous that I'm not down there, but we have to man the home front here with master control and everything. So somebody has to stay behind.
Our guest this afternoon is Tom Bodett. You know the name, you know the voice from Motel 6. Tom, real quick, you said earlier, just kind of in passing, I kind of caught it, that you hitchhike all the way to Alaska. Is that correct?
More than once. That's how I got up there the first time, and then I hitchhiked back to Michigan after that summer to attend my older brother's wedding, and then went back to Alaska again, and then I don't think I hitchhiked again. I think that was my last trip. But this was back, in the 70s. That was a normal way to get around. It was perfectly well accepted, and a lot of truckers, would get rides. I would really always try to get let off at a truck stop rather than somewhere else, because I'd rather go in and talk to the drivers and maybe meet one that I could talk into taking me on. Most of them couldn't do it, of course, because of the laws and regulations, but you'd find one, often as not, who'd be willing to take you with him. So I really enjoyed that.
See, you've got quite a history then with drivers, and you were kind of a traveler yourself.
Yeah, I spent, I dropped out of college in spring of 75, and I spent most of the next 2 years just traveling. I went to Oregon, and then I went to, I had an accident there that had me in the hospital for quite a while, and then got over that, went up to Alaska, went back to Michigan, then went back to Alaska, and the whole time I've just, kind of felt like one of these old tramp loggers guys, where I was just being this young, Jack London character. That's the fantasy I had about myself, that I was having all these, these Western high adventures, and then someday I was going to sit down and write my masterpiece. And I did sit down and write, but I never did come up with the masterpiece. So.
Well, if you were a Jack London fan, Alaska would be a wonderful place to live to inspire your writing.
Oh, God, yes. And in the 70s, oh, my goodness, Shelley, that place was, it was the 20th century equivalent of what it must have been like in San Francisco in 1855. It was crazy. They needed everything. Like, the joke was, you could walk down the street and somebody on a construction site would hold up a hammer and say, "Hey, kid, what's this?" You go, "That's a hammer." They say, "You're hired." and that's hardly an exaggeration. And I lied my way into every job I ever had here. It just, say, "Well, you ever build houses?" "Oh, yeah, that's all I used to do before I came up here." "And you ever welded?" Yeah, of course.
You just learn as you went along. That's pretty amazing.
Yes. Yes, we started a lot of fires. We broke a lot of things, but we managed. We learned.
Did you have that talent as a child to basically just kind of step into something and then learn as you went?
Oh, you mean lie?
Well,
yes, I think so. My dad, and I didn't appreciate this about him enough when I lived with him. He was like a mechanical engineer. They made air conditioners for like mobile homes and things. And he wasn't a carpenter. He was not a plumber or any of that. But I never once saw a workman in our house growing up. He did everything himself. We lived in this crummy old house in Sturgis, Michigan, that he was constantly having to work on. I helped him jack up the foundation, jack up and put a new foundation under it. We put a new boiler in. He built a new kitchen, and all of this he would do on the weekends with, help from his kids as much as we could be. And it was only after I kind of left home and looked back on it, I realized that he was just figuring that out as he went. And he did not have any experience in any of that stuff that I watched him do. And I learned from him. So I basically learned from a guy who didn't know what he was doing, right? So, so it did two things. It made me unafraid of trying things I didn't know how to do. and it allowed me to learn.
Well, what a wonderful example. And certainly that sort of courage and fearlessness helped in what you became in terms of a signature voice for Motel 6, because auditioning, that's pretty terrifying for a lot of people when you think about it.
Well, it kind of was. The thing was is that, being sort of this doofus from Alaska, I wasn't intimidated at all by like people in suits and all of that, because they may have been important in their world, but they weren't important in my world. You know what I mean? There was nothing to compare them to. I mean, I did know an opportunity when I saw one, and I didn't want to screw it up, but I certainly didn't know what the rules and regs were. There's a fun story that the original engineer, worked with us for years on the campaign, Bob Lindner, who's since passed away. In the very first session, like the control room it had the writer in it, this David Fowler, who was a great guy, and I really liked him. And then all these guys in suits who were like always huddling and talking and getting on the phone and things, and they were making me nervous. And Bob, the engineer, came in to do something with adjust my microphone, and I asked him. I said, "Hey, would it be weird if we asked all those suits to leave?" And he said, "Hey, you're the talent. You're supposed to be weird." I said, "Well, I didn't know that." "Well, then can we ask them to leave?" And the great thing is that they left and they never came back. From then on, every session, it was always just me and the writer, and we would work through the scripts. We would, do that. And then when we were all done, we would play it for the bosses. And they would either love it or have us do something again. But they left us alone and let us do our work. And I give them a lot of credit for that, because I think that's what contributed to the campaign staying so warm and natural as it has over the years, because they weren't always breathing down our necks to do, one corporate thing or another, which, that's their job, right?
Sure. You were able to maintain the authenticity, and that's the charm, I think, of the whole campaign in Motel 6.
I'm glad you noticed.
So I had a question. What inspired you to leave Michigan? Why would you go to Alaska? Was it a final frontier that you really, really wanted to explore, or?
I used to joke that it's as far away as I get from my family, but that was just to get laughs. It wasn't really the truth. It was only half true. But the real truth is, when I was in the 7th grade, my mom and dad took me and 2 of my brothers. There were 6 of us, but they took just their 3 favorites, I like to say, and took us out west. My dad was testing some air conditioner for the company he worked for, so we had this motorhome with a prototype air conditioner on the roof, which hardly ever worked. And we flew to Las Vegas, and then we drove all through the desert in Arizona, went to the Grand Canyon, went into the Rocky Mountains, and then we went out west and went into Yosemite and the Sierra Nevadas. And I just lost my mind. I had no idea growing up in Michigan that there were such things as the Rocky Mountains and the Pacific Ocean, and not to mention San Francisco in 1967. Okay, that sticks in a young man's mind. And when I got back to Michigan, I was like, I never could settle again. It was kind of like you can't take, once they've seen Paris, you can't get them back on the farm. And
Right, yep.
and that's how I felt. And from that moment on, it was just like kind of me looking at my watch, like, when can I leave? When can I leave? When can I get back out west? So I wasn't really heading to Alaska. I was just heading out west. And Oregon was the first place that I landed, because I got a job planting trees there outside of a little town called Ashland and Medford down in the south. And that could have been any place. I mean, that could have been Redding, California, or Cheyenne, Wyoming. It just happened to be the place where I got the job and stayed for a while. And then the next year, when I went back, I thought, well, what else can you show me? And I started heading north. I'd heard that there were some really good jobs to be had up up in Alaska. I was a little misinformed. The pipeline was actually kind of wrapping up by then, and they weren't hiring much. But once I got there, there was plenty else to do: fishing jobs and logging and oil rigs, and I mean, there was just no end to what what a guy could do. If you were 21 and able-bodied in Alaska in 1976, it was like the best place on earth you could be.
And beautiful country.
Oh
I mean,
God!
it really is. It's
I mean,
God's country. It's gorgeous.
it's impossible to describe. And it's funny, I lived there for 23 years, and it's still, whenever I go back, I'm struck all over again at the scale of it. Like, you can remember it's beautiful and you can see the pictures of all this, but you forget the scale of it. To stand there and actually see the size of the place, that never fails to amaze me. And that got me then as well. As a young man, it was like, okay, I'm ruined for life. I'll never be able to leave this.
Well, and it's kind of like what our country, you could imagine what our country was over 200 years ago, before we had all the major cities and everything, the beautiful vistas, basically the last frontier. But you went out to Vermont, and that's pretty rural too, and that's a beautiful state.
Right. It's almost like starting over, You come out to Vermont. I mean, nobody's really successfully farmed here in 150 years. So I'll be killed for saying that. But, essentially, this ground was just, it's the best they had until they discovered Ohio. And then that was the best they had until Illinois. And then on they just kept moving west. And then in terms of like the frontiers and all that, if I learned nothing else from being in Alaska in those years, is that the West was won by a lot of meatheads like me. It really was. It was just the young knuckleheads looking for fun and adventure,
Sure.
who just happened to, spread civilization as they went,
Right. Yeah.
such as it was.
Well, but they were also innovative, which you are, certainly. And I think you picked up a lot of that from your dad, being able to observe and not being afraid to try things. I think that's a lot of people kind of get stuck there. They're afraid to try new things, and you weren't, and you haven't been, which is great.
I haven't been punished, except for the fact I'm about 30% scar tissue. I haven't really been punished a lot for taking those risks, at least in the non-physical ways. The part of it is Alaska was so good to me in so many ways, in terms of friendship and career and relationships and all of it, that I started to stop being afraid of making mistakes, because they didn't seem to make much difference. You try something, it goes away, and then there's the next thing right in front of you. I never met knocking on wood, the fatal mistake that changed anything. So after a while, if you're paying attention, it's like, there's really not that much to be afraid of. Just go live,
Sure. Absolutely. So what do you farm? You're a farmer, correct?
No, I'm not a farmer.
Okay.
I live in the middle of 22 acres of hay, which I have a farmer cut for me, because
Oh, okay.
I looked at getting into it, especially when my boys were small. We've been here like 18 years, and they both were raised here. And I thought, well, wouldn't it be good for us to be involved with this and actually, mow and bale it? And then I started pricing out the equipment, for the, I had the tractor, but the baler and the tedder and all of this stuff, it's just like, holy smokes. And there's like, what you get for a bale of hay, like $3, right? So
Right. Yeah.
I says, well, I don't think I'm going to live long enough to earn this back, and
Right.
the boys might, but I think they'll lose interest before that. So we just stayed with helping the farmer, load his bales over it. But we are surrounded by farms. One great thing about this new, I don't know if you call it the local VORM movement, but the eat locally,
Yep.
and farm to table thing that you see everywhere. is that these little farms around Vermont that were largely unsustainable for many years because they can't compete with the big, factory, the big farms.
Sure.
Is they're coming back because younger families are taking them on. They're growing, specialty crops and selling them at local markets. And sometimes they'll do value added stuff. Like there's this goat farm that they make this amazing goat milk taffy that they sell down at these high-end boutique stores in New York, and there's other places that make specialty cheeses, and they go to Boston and New York, and they're raising their kids on farms just like the old days. It's just a little slightly different variation on the market. They're savvy. They've got websites. I love one. They do these specialty cheeses to New York, and the way they distribute them is students from New York come up to ski on the weekends, and then they have this network where they go pick up cheese on this farm, and then they deliver it to specific restaurants and stores when they get back to the city. So it's like they pay for their ski weekend by being cheese mules, on their way home.
Yeah. Now, isn't Vermont noted for its maple syrup?
Indeed, it is.
Mm-hmm.
I have maple trees that my neighbor taps, and I end up, depending on what kind of year it is, we'll end up with anywhere from 2 to 5 gallons of fresh Vermont syrup. It's never enough, though. Not when you've got 2 boys in the house. It's not.
Well, and some great pancakes and Vermont maple syrup. I mean, that's living. And 20 acres around you and just looking at God's country and being away from the craziness of the big city life. I would imagine that's just exactly what you really enjoy.
I feel very, very lucky to be here. It's a great place to raise kids. It's a great, community of people here. It's the old, you get it everywhere in rural America. I mean, people look after each other. And it's just who we are as Americans. I truly regret that we have lost sight of that, where we've separated ourselves somehow into, red and blue and this and that. I've never lived, Alaska was as conservative as they get. Vermont probably as liberal as they get. There's no difference. The people are exactly the same. They care about exactly the same things, and they look after each other in exactly the same ways. And I just wish that we hadn't lost so much track of that. But, we'll get through this too, I think.
This and all shall pass. What is that phrase?
This too shall pass.
Yes. Yeah, because after all, we're all Americans, and that's what's made this country work for well over 200 years. So I think people will remember that eventually. It's just a matter of waiting.
Let's hope.
Yeah, absolutely. We have to go to break here, Tom. You're listening to the Truckers Network radio show on TNCRadio.Live. I'm Shelley Johnson talking with Tom Bodett, the signature voice of Motel 6. We've got some more great stories from Tom coming up, so stay tuned.
Highway heroes, 18 wheels, keep moving on as the world stands still. Break a 1-9, you got the rolling stone. Truck on, truck on, truck on.
TNCRadio.Live wants to make sure you purchase a copy of John Schneider's new album, Truck On, that features great songs like Born at a Truck Stop, Truck On, Stand On It, and Cowboys Don't Get Old. John Schneider rocks the life of a trucker in this album. The lyrics are clever, the music is great, and his vocals are his usual best. What's even better is a portion of the proceeds from the Truck On album will benefit St. Christopher Truckers Relief Fund, which helps truckers and their families in their time of need. Get the Truck On album at johnschneiderstudios.com or on Amazon. We'll feature a link on TNCRadio.Live. Truckers and St. Christopher Truckers Relief Fund will thank you. You're listening to the Truckers Network radio show. I'm Shelley Johnson with Bill Waldrop, and we're talking with Tom Bodett here on TNCRadio.Live. He's the signature voice of Motel 6. We've been having some really great stories that Tom's been telling us, and basically how he evolved, went from Michigan to Alaska, and now he's in Vermont. A very interesting story. Tom, I understand you said that you've got some spots that Motel 6 has that are for our drivers.
Yeah, that's right. Motel 6 has been recognizing drivers throughout the pandemic because they were, the frontline essential worker getting stuff moved around no matter how shut down everyone else was. And just this summer, we've done a campaign specific to bringing back the trucker's horn salute. Remember that probably back when I was a kid, you pull your arm down and the truckers would blow their horns. And so we're doing some spots about bringing that back. We've got a television one, then we've got 2 radio, and I'd like to play the radio for you if I can.
Absolutely. We'd love to hear it.
All right, here's one of them. This is for kids in the back seat. Hi, Tom Bodett for Motel 6, leaving the light on for kids in the back seat. Instead of playing Blast the Candy Clash or whatever on your phone, try looking out the window for a change and playing I Spy a Trucker. When you see one, pump your arm as a way of saying thanks for all they do. They'll give you a horn blast so loud you'll forget there's no cell service in the middle of Nebraska. I'm Tom Bodett for Motel 6, and we'll leave the light on for you.
I love that. Isn't that fun? True. Oh, absolutely. And that's what kids did. I did it. Get the driver to honk his horn. I mean, that was just so much fun, especially when the trips were long and boring. Because when you're a kid, it's like, are we there yet?
Right.
Right.
And then when they do that, you felt like somehow you moved the earth. Wow.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Serious power. And it's like he sees me. This is so cool. Yeah. Absolutely.
And then here's another one, and this one is same thing but directed at the drivers.
Okay.
Hi, Tom Bodett for Motel 6, leaving the light on for truckers. As a thanks for all you do, we're asking America to bring back the air pump salute. We know you miss kids doing it. It always brought a smile to your face on an otherwise lonely stretch of road. So keep an eye out for wound-up kids in the back seat pumping their little arms off. Then give them an air horn blast that'll blow their tiny minds. I'm Tom Bodett for Motel 6, and we'll leave the light on for you.
I love it. That is so very, very cool. Did you write those spots, Tom?
No, I did not. We always play with them in the studio, but okay. I got to give that credit to the writers at the agency. A really great group of people, and they get it. They get it. So it's always fun working on this stuff, and I hope people will take a look at the TV too. There's just some wonderful shots of the trucks and drivers and that it's the stuff. It really is the stuff.
This is awesome. We have less than a minute, and Tom, I wanted to have you plug your website if you'd like, so people can buy your books. This has been a wonderful conversation.
Oh, yeah. Well, my website is absolutely, it's like a cemetery. I don't know if I've done anything there in years. Don't worry about my books. Go to hatchspace.org. That's my woodworking school that I spend all my time at these days. And take a look at what we're doing. And if you feel like making a donation to our little cause, we would love that as well. Hatchspace.org.
This is
Thank
awesome.
you, Shelley.
Thank you so much, Tom. I've thoroughly enjoyed talking to you, and I think that the drivers really have enjoyed it too. You're true Americana, and you're absolutely a trucker's friend. We love it.
Oh, thank you. I certainly am. It was great, Shelley. I really enjoyed telling those old stories again.
Thank you so much, Tom. You have a great afternoon. You're listening to TNCRadio.Live. This is the Truckers Network radio show. I'm Shelley Johnson. We've been speaking with Motel 6's spokesman and signature voice, Tom Bodett. Stay tuned for more great stuff right here on TNCRadio.Live.